Recording to the cloud. And
okay, we are now being recorded, folks, just so you know. We're also going to be on eBay and on YouTube. So there's different ways to watch it. So everybody, welcome. We're really glad to see you here. More and more people are coming in. We've got a really tight schedule with some amazing people here tonight. And the first person we're going to hear from, her name is Justine Burt. And basically, she says that you don't need to wait for Congress. And we all know that if we wait for Congress, we might as well give up. Anyway, she's going to talk about creating jobs that really do things that support the environment, sustainable economy, restoring nature. Anyway, so she's going to show us the path forward on doing this. And she has an interesting background. She currently works for a nonprofit in Silicon Valley that's focused on providing quality of life for the workers and their families. She has over 20 years experience consulting on sustainability. She's written a book called The Great Pivot, Creating Meaningful Work to Build a Sustainable Future. So I'm really thrilled to turn the floor over to her and listen up. She's got a lot to say. Welcome, Justine.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'm so excited to be in a Zoom meeting that starts with music. Thank you so much. That was so lovely. Brightened my day, and I'm sure you brightened everyone else's day. We don't need to wait for Congress. It would be nice if Congress would pass a Green New Deal, but there's so much we can do locally at the city, county level in our region. And I'm so excited to share with you 9 examples of green jobs we could be creating locally, give a little context about why it's so important, because here come my slides. This was a book I published 2 years ago about creating millions of green jobs. I saw too many job postings for like the recycling manager for Alameda County that would help their 10,000 employees recycle more. And 400 people would apply for it and 399 wouldn't get it. There's so much work that needs to be done. There's so many wonderful people who really want to do this kind of meaningful work. And we've got the funding to do it. So let's connect up those dots. COVID broke so many systems in our country. It broke public transportation, it broke healthcare, it broke where we go to work, where our kids go to school. It broke the commercial food supply chain. This is a picture of a potato farmer plowing under his potato crop. Remember last March, a little over a year ago, when all of a sudden the shelves in the grocery stores were empty and the restaurants closed, the hotels closed, the schools closed, and we figured, well, surely the people growing food or cows, dairy cows, so we could have milk, surely that food can all switch over to the retail end where we'll buy it in the grocery stores. And it turned out it couldn't. And so we saw pictures of farmers dumping out millions of gallons of milk and plowing under crops and throwing away onions and carrots. And it was just heartbreaking at a time when 10 million Californians out of 40 million were food insecure and didn't know where at least one of their meals was coming from, or didn't have access to reliable, nutritious food. So we're in this critical time where something old is dying away. COVID broke all these old systems. And before the old systems build themselves back up, we could pivot. We could build things in a new way if we have our design in mind and how much better the future could be, a more resilient, sustainable future. So now's a really critical time to do that. And as we think about what we want the future to look like, my book really covers 30 different green jobs ideas in 5 different areas. We could be decarbonizing our energy system faster, decarbonizing our transportation system, building a circular economy, which means instead of extraction, just manufacturing, use, disposal in the landfill, we truly could be preventing waste, reusing, recycling, and composting. The 4th area is reducing the amount of food that's wasted. 40% of all the food we raise and grow is thrown away, which is inexcusable in a time when so many people are food insecure. And then we all know with the 4 million acres that burned last year, there's so much we could do to restore healthy forests and healthy waterways. We could be sequestering carbon in the soil and restoring wildlife populations. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And at the same time, we're having this wonderful discussion about a just transition, making sure that it works for everybody. And you know, if we do this work to decarbonize our energy transportation system, create a circular economy, minimize food waste, and restore nature, we're going to be helping people on the front lines of climate change, on the front lines of pollution. If we by making these changes, the people who live near oil refineries, power plants, highway interchanges, airports, shipping ports, landfills, agricultural fields that are being sprayed with pesticides and herbicides, near confined animal feeding operations, by moving to a sustainable way, we're helping the low-income folks who are right next to these old dirty industries. So there's a lot of work to be done. And we're all very aware of the Green New Deal resolution that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey introduced about 2 years ago. You may be familiar that in April, Representative Cori Bush and AOC introduced a Green New Deal for cities, counties, tribes, and territories, which is super amazing. This is where the funding should be going. People working in the cities, counties don't have enough funding to do all these, to help facilitate job creation. And Green New Deal for cities, counties, tribes, and territories says $1 trillion over 4 years would go to these 4 different local entities to create green jobs that would help us stabilize the climate. Not sure it's going to pass, but sure glad they're talking about it. Here we are in California. We're so proud of our legislators who are also like Rob Bonta, who's from Oakland, and now I believe he's the attorney general. But there's been a lot of legislation. Not sure if that's going to pass either at the state level. We don't have to wait for the state or the feds to do things, and that's why I want to share with you that one city council member. I'm on the peninsula. One city council member in Menlo Park said, it really helped to have activists asking us to pass a climate emergency declaration, because, you know, by having that cover and being able to pass this declaration, that then gave us cover to be even more ambitious, to do more specific things later. So push for a climate emergency declaration at your city. And we're also, 2 weeks ago, Vitska Medema, Mark Van Landhoyt and I gave a presentation through the Contra Costa County climate leaders for mayors, city council members in Contra Costa County about a Bay Area Green New Deal. We gave them all kinds of legislation, that's resolutions and ordinances that have already been done at the city level to make it easy for them to just change the line and put their city's name in, because honestly, the cities need more resources. One city in Contra Costa County, one of the former mayors told me they have 23 staff members and 13 of them are police. They just don't have enough resources to make these kinds of changes. So I think there's an incredible opportunity at the city level. And I want to give you 9 examples of the kinds of projects that we could be asking for and pushing more for. And so here's an example. This is pre-COVID. There's a nonprofit called Replate that when Salesforce has a conference and they have 40 extra trays of surplus prepared food, they go on their app and they get in touch with Replate and say, we'll pay you $40 to come pick it up. And by not depending just on volunteers, but actually paying someone, Matt Stepanovich has a job where he drives over, picks it up, and takes it to the Emeryville homeless shelter. We need to normalize companies, caterers paying to have large amounts of surplus prepared food, paying for someone to pick that up, because that creates a green job. I love this story. So St. Vincent de Paul in Lane County, Oregon, which is right down the street from the University of Oregon, in 2016 hired a full-time fashion designer to work in their St. Vincent de Paul store in Lane County, Oregon. And Mitra Chester started by looking at the donations pile the first week she was there. Keep in mind, it's right down the street from the university. And she saw a lot of donations of Western gear and military gear. She put that out for sale. She's thinking the students might want to wear these to weekend parties. But then she looked for opportunities to upcycle things. And I think this is an amazing opportunity. Every thrift store should have a fashion designer. She saw there were a lot of flannel shirts and a lot of hoodie sweatshirts coming in. And she cut the sleeves off both and then sewed the flannel sleeves onto the hoodie sweatshirt bodies, put a bunch of those out for sale. As soon as the students heard about it, sold out. She made another batch, they sold out. She took old leather couches that were coming in that were ripped and stained and cut them into pieces that she sewed into leather tote bags. She took their average daily sales from $500 a day to $1,500 a day. That's an extra $300,000 a year that St. Vincent de Paul can use to provide safety net for people in their county. I would love to see this happen more widely. You probably know that the city of Berkeley has a tool lending library. Each one of California's 482 cities and towns should have one. The town loves this. It's a beloved amenity. Instead of everyone having to buy the same 100 tools that sit unused most of the time in the garage, they can just go borrow landscaping tools, construction tools, woodworking tools. They recently started loaning out kitchen tools, and their ice cream makers and their air fryers are the most popular ones. They started with a federal grant of $30,000 with the idea of offering tools for free to low-income residents, and it's just grown from there. If every one of California's towns had 2 full-time people working in these, it would be nearly 1,000 jobs. The city of Portland in 2016 started requiring all houses that were built before 1916, to be deconstructed instead of demolished. It was breaking the city's heart to see all these old Victorian houses demolished, just smashed, pushed over into a dumpster and hauled to the landfill. And they said, no, you're throwing out solid oak wood flooring. You see these framing beams? That's old growth timber. They're like, you can't throw it away anymore. You can't throw away kitchen cabinets, solid doors, banisters, clawfoot tubs. They said you need to deconstruct instead of demolish. And they did a training for 14 people on building deconstruction over 3 days. They trained 2 people who were right out of prison, 7 of whom were homeless, the rest had entry-level skills. And by training them for 3 days about building deconstruction and then putting them on a job, what were they also learning? When they were learning deconstruction, they were also learning construction. So just by setting that ordinance, which has since changed to 1940, any house built before 1940 has to be deconstructed instead of demolished, they created a bunch of jobs. We need to move away from burning fossil fuels in our homes. You all have probably heard the campaigns that are trying to raise awareness about the fact that burning natural gas in the home introduces a lot of indoor air pollution. So switching over space heaters, water heaters, dryers, cook stoves to electric from natural gas is going to take a lot of people. We have 14 million buildings in California. Most of them burn natural gas. These retrofits are going to create a lot of jobs. California only has 71,000 electricians. We're going to need double that to do all the retrofits over the next generation. Here is a 1-story concrete tilt-up office building in Sunnyvale, and you can see how dark it is. And once they did the retrofits, you can see how much lighter it is. This is going to take work as well. And so the reason it's so much, I wish I had more time so I could ask you all questions, but the reason it's so much brighter is because you'll notice on the top, they added skylights, which brings natural light in. They tacked white fabric onto the ceiling and they painted the concrete floor white. So you can see how it bounces, the space bounces the light inside. Notice there's no artificial light in this picture. And then compare that with how dark it was before. So we could be retrofitting office buildings to need a lot less forced air, a lot less artificial light, which would reduce the energy use of the building. Every police station, every fire station, every hospital, every K-12 school should have a solar microgrid. And solar microgrid is basically solar PV panels, energy storage, electric vehicle charging, and then monitoring communications and controls. And that means when PG&E does a public safety power shutoff, that they can cut off from the grid and still function. When we have a big earthquake, at some point we're going to get an 8.0 or a 9.0 earthquake. We need the fire stations to be able to respond. We need the police to be able to respond. The hospitals need to have intensive care units running, their emergency room, their operating room, bare minimum lights. If they had solar microgrids, they could do this. So it's something to think about. And there's power purchase agreements. There's all, we know how to do it. We just need to actually do it at the local level. This is a picture of a K through 12 school in Salinas. These are their energy storage batteries. They have solar energy storage, they're a microgrid. So when the power goes down, the parents, the children at these schools in Salinas are primarily the children of migrant laborers who are about an hour away in fields. By having uninterruptible clean power, the parents know that if the power goes down, their kids are fine. They don't need to leave their work to go get them. So we should have every K through 12 school. There are 10,000 K through 12 schools in California should have this. And finally, my favorite, I just did my climate ride a few weeks ago, bike riding 100 miles to raise money for my favorite nonprofit. We should make it easier for people to bicycle. Only single digits of people feel comfortable sharing the roads with cars. If, like in Davis, there were more protected bike lanes where cyclists were protected from drivers, then more people would feel comfortable. 48% of all trips in urban and suburban areas are 3 miles or less. So there's a lot more trips people could be taking if they felt comfortable being out on the road. So how you create jobs, green jobs, is by having the funding to do it. If you've got the funding, you can hire the people. So where has money come from to create jobs in the private sector, nonprofit sector, public sector? Well, in the private sector, microloans or crowdfunding, community capital, impact investing. We all know about commercial bank loans. Project finance is the instrument that financed the $5 million of microgrids at the K through 12 schools in Salinas at 6 schools. Venture capital has actually given round after round of funding to, why am I blanking on the name? It's the Ugly Produce, blanking on the name, Ugly Produce organization out of, they were in San Francisco, now they're in Berkeley. They've gotten round after round of, what is it?
Imperfect Foods.
Thank you. I'm like, it's not Impossible Foods. Imperfect Foods. Thank you. They've gotten a lot of rounds of venture capital because VCs think there's so much potential to divert two-legged and lumpy apples to people. The nonprofit sector gets its funding from philanthropic grants, from government grants, to revolving loan funds. As I was doing the research for this book, I thought, well, what do we need the public sector to do that the private sector and the nonprofit sector won't do? And so the public sector can levy taxes on polluting activities and disperse those funds to create green jobs, to fix what was wrong and to do things in a more sustainable way. Green bonds are growing quickly. Last year, Germany issued, I think it was either 6 billion in green bonds. And then it was so popular that like $30 billion was chasing $6 billion of green bonds, that they did another issuance for $11 billion. So here's just a sense of the funding options for creating green jobs. And I did an article on Medium last July about, the headline was creating 14.3 million new deep green jobs. And it was just based on other people's analysis. Mark Jacobson at Stanford, who did the Solutions Project, says that if in the United States, if we go 100% renewable, we're going to create 5.2 million jobs just for that. If we brought back a new civilian conservation corps, which Biden is talking about, Climate Corps, and hired as many people as FDR did in the 30s, it would be 3.4 million jobs. If we created a robust high-speed rail network like Europe has, that would be 2.5 million jobs. Switching agriculture, which is in the single digits organic, over to primarily organic agriculture is more labor intensive, but a lot of people do want to be doing that. That would be 1.1 million jobs. Currently in California, we actually on average divert 37% of materials from landfill. If we went for 75%, 32% overall in the United States, if we went for 75% diversion, that would create 1 million jobs. And doing the building energy efficiency retrofits, 800,000 jobs. So the last thought I want to leave you with is that there's this term in Japan called ikigai, and it means reason for living. people in the Okinawa prefecture have some of the longest life expectancies in the world, in part because they have a healthy diet and they're active, but also because people well into their 11th decade feel useful and needed in their community. And so if we look at the word ikigai, reason for living, through the lens of American work, you have ikigai at work if you have four things. You're doing work you love, that the world needs, that you're good at, and that someone will pay you for. And I think everyone deserves to have this. And I just think a lot of people would love to be doing green jobs. And there's money. I interviewed Jigar Shah, who was the president of Generate Capital that did the Salinas microgrids. And he said, Justine, we've raised $1 trillion for climate solutions. We've only been able to deploy 300 billion of it. We need more requests for proposals. We need more projects to invest in. And that's only one financing option. So people want to be doing this work. Money's looking for places to invest. We need to pivot the way we're doing things. So I just wanted to give you several examples of what we could be doing at the local level to create green jobs as a way to address the climate, which we so need to stabilize. The last thought I want to leave you with is that I'm reading The Ministry of the Future, which is a wonderful work set in the future about optimistic climate change solutions. And it's really wonderful. And at one point it's fictionalized, but it's got all these great nuggets about different climate solutions. And he says, the world is burning 40 gigatons of greenhouse gases a year. We can only burn 500 gigatons. There's 3,000 gigatons in the earth. We pull it all out, it's game over for the climate. So we've got 10 years to pull this together, and creating green jobs is a way to make that happen. And here's my book. It's available on Chelsea Green Publishing if you want to get a copy. If you have any questions or anywhere else you think I should give this talk, get in touch with me at thegreatpivot@gmail.com.
All right. We're going to open it to questions now. If you have a question, raise your hand in the, where is it on here?
Under reactions?
Yeah, under reactions, or if you're under the participant section, you can hover over yourself and raise your hand.
And if you're on the phone, I think it's either *9 or *set. I think it's *9.
Okay.
Star,
so
star
what's your
9
question?
says is a raised hand. *6 unmutes you.
Great.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're open now for questions to Justine.
Matthew has his hand raised, Carol.
Okay, go for it, Matthew.
Yeah, I remember you were mentioning imperfect things like imperfect produce as a way to, having a more green economy. But I wish that I had what I'm about to refer to in front of me. But I remember there was a thing I saw maybe a couple years ago that basically said that imperfect produce, that the fruit and stuff that had these that didn't look nice is already being used. Like it already gets used for things like, I don't remember if it's like things like applesauce and juice, and or like you see it at like more low income supermarkets. I think it was one or the other, and that this imperfect produce thing is really just capitalism trying to repackage things that already are going to be consumed and like upselling it to like the upper middle class to like feel good about themselves. And I was just wondering, I know that's not like, I know you weren't like saying like stuff like imperfect produce is the entire Green New Deal, but I'm just wondering what your response would be about that, because you were bringing it up.
Great question. Great question. So much has changed in the past year. So many more people are food insecure because of COVID. And I was actually talking to head of the California Association of Food Banks, and she said imperfect produce kind of competes with us for ugly produce. I think the more the merrier. Just there's so much produce that's thrown away, and the fact that they've marketed, two-legged carrots are ugly, but they still taste the same if you chop them up with, tomatoes and throw them in with some lettuce. It still makes a great salad. It's interesting you say that, because when I was interviewing people for the book, I interviewed Full Belly Farm, which is in Yolo County. It's northwest of Sacramento. And Judith Redmond, one of the owners of the farm, she's like, I don't understand imperfect produce. We don't have any waste at all on our 400-acre farm. I mean, we've got 60 people who work here. Any tomatoes that are lumpy, we just feed to the chickens. So imperfect produce, I agree with you in a way. Yeah, they are taking that produce and just marketing it to upper middle class people. But at the same time, they're also on the front lines of when there was a shipping container full of Myers lemons coming from Australia, and the California Myers lemons crop came in 2 weeks early because of climate change, that those lemons would have been thrown away. But Imperfect intercepted them and found a market for them. So I think there's enough room for everybody who's working on the food waste angle from different perspectives. My main concern at this point is that all the tripling the donations going to the food banks. My husband's company said, if you make a nonprofit donation, we'll match it, but if you make it to the food bank, we'll triple it. I hope that doesn't fall away as we emerge from COVID. But that is to say, thank you for your thoughts. And I think there's enough work for everyone to divert that 40% of the food that we're throwing away in our country.
Okay, we have 2 more raised hands at this point. So we'll go first with Sudia and then with Michael. Go ahead, Sudia.
You're on mute.
Unmute yourself.
Bottom left.
Unmute. All
There
right,
you are.
Yeah.
Can you
Okay,
hear us now? Okay. Hi, so my question is, have you heard of the organization called Rewiring America? And if you do have, maybe you could say a little bit about it. If you haven't, I could say something about it as well.
Well, I have read a bit about them. They would like to see us electrify everything. Our houses, our commercial offices, our transportation. What I haven't heard yet is what exactly the plan is. I know they wanted the federal government to give low interest loans because they were saying it's going to cost $40,000 per household to electrify everything. So where's that money going to come from? More than half Americans don't even have $1,000 in savings. Where's that money going to come from? So if you can make it cost neutral for people, so instead of spending $90 each month writing a check to Pacific Gas and Electric, if you could write that to your financier and not have to have an energy bill, like that's all the specificity I've heard. I know they're working on it. What do you have to add to that?
Yeah, no, you had a pretty good read on it. I mean, I read their book, and the idea is it's a group of climate action people and scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs and data people, and they have really crunched a lot of numbers and done a lot of engineering to actually look at what is it going to take in terms of investment, in terms of public monies, in terms of private monies, hopefully to some extent, to actually, as their name implies, electrify everything. In other words, this is the way to get rid of the fossil fuel economy, one of the ways. And they're very cognizant that activism plays a part in all this because we need push and pull. You know, we need the pull of the carrot of the new economy, just as Justine has been talking about, all the jobs and all the efficiency that goes with it. But we also, need the guard dogs and the stick to beat people like Biden and the Republicans who are resistant to that happening. And I think they do a good job and actually make a very good scientific analysis of what it takes and what the numbers are. As Justine just said, they've really gotten it down to a science about how much money, how much is it going to cost for each household in the United States to put a solar array on the roof, have an electric car, have an electric water heater, an electric range, and electric heating in the house. And how are we going to get there? And as you said, the low interest loans that the government could easily subsidize or just give on its own would be the way that they're recommending to do it.
Easily. Thank you for bringing that up. And then we're going to need 800,000 electricians. So let's let our kids who really don't want to go to college but are really good with their hands do something besides college and do something useful.
Yeah. So what I was going to mention is, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there was a big demonstration of Sunrise Movement in front of the White House, speaking directly to Joe Biden, telling him that he has to keep his promises. And it's the young people that got him elected, that did all the work to get him elected, and that he should be talking to them rather than trying to negotiate with Republicans. So there's a few speeches online at their demonstration that are really powerful, and I recommend just seeing them. They're on YouTube.
I'm so grateful for Sunrise. Carol, how are we doing? Do we have time for Michael's question?
Yeah, and then this is gonna have to be the last question, and we're gonna have to move on to the next person. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Michael.
My question is simple. You mentioned the two-legged carrots. I volunteer at Alameda County Food Bank. There's plenty of two-legged carrots. They buy bulk from the grower, and then we package them into smaller packages. I think we can be much more ambitious. I think this is an education issue. We need to educate our Americans to accept this edible stuff that they don't look good. How do we go about doing this? Does it take some political will, or how do we do this?
We definitely need more education about ugly produce and expiration dates. And one of my consulting projects is with the Bay Area Recycling Outreach Coalition, and we actually just launched our campaign last week, a 6-week campaign to let people know that they should. I mean, there's two-legged carrots, but the bigger issue is if people would just, before they go grocery shopping, look in your refrigerator and your cabinets, make a list of food you already have that you need to use up, the meals that you would make from those if you had certain ingredients. And when I do that, I find there are only like 10 to 15 items I need to buy. So if you can use up what you have, that's like the biggest difference we can make in terms of food waste, because the largest portion of food waste happens in the residents.
But my point is that if, let's say, Safeway spend $10 a pound to buy carrots that looks really nice. If they buy all of the carrots, it's only $5. Then the cost is cut down in half already. It's much, much bigger in scale than this individual house. How do we execute these?
How do you get people to want to buy ugly carrots?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that these are, again, jobs at the city and county level, education jobs that we could be doing. I'm happy to talk to you more offline about it. I know Carol wanted to get to the next
That's
agenda.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Justine. And I hope we can have you back
Yes.
sometime.
Happy to. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, the next person that's going to speak is Steve Ongareth. He's a labor environmental activist here in the Bay Area. And let's see, he actually put something here in the chat. He's currently a public transportation worker. He's a ferry deckhand, co-founder of IWW Environmental Union Caucus, co-founder of Labor for Standing Rock. He's got a whole list of really impressive things that he's put in the chat if you want to check it. So welcome.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me speak. It's an honor to be here, and I also want to say thank you to Justine Burt. You're going to be a tough act to follow, and I do not have a slide presentation. I'm going to be reading off a document, which I will post in the chat box a little bit, but I want to talk about the importance of just transition. Now, first of all, I'm sure many of you have heard the just transition. As far as we know, it was a term first uttered by Tony Mazzocchi, the late leader of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, who was very much pro-environment and realized that eventually the industries which his workers in his union were working in would have to be transitioned to something new, because otherwise it would be game over for the planet. And he wrote an essay once, said that there was a super fund for dirt, but there needs to be a super fund for workers. And the idea of just transition, that those workers who are adversely affected by the transition should not have to pay for the transition, because they're not the ones responsible for doing the destruction in the first place. It's the bosses. So, in other words, that would mean that if any transition resulted in the loss of jobs, these workers would be made whole. The term has become somewhat more complex in recent years. It has also been expanded by some, particularly the environmental justice community, to to mean not only do the workers who are adversely affected by the transition are made whole, but also the communities in which these facilities have operated, in which they have pretty much socialized the cost but privatized the wealth, also need to be made whole and need to be given reparations. So it's a much broader concept of what just transition means. I'm going to focus a little bit mainly on what it means for workers in the industry first, because although I completely agree with the broader definition of just transition and agree that reparations need to be made whole, and I try to bring that point to my union brothers and sisters. Apologies for the non-gender neutral term there, but it's also true that the workers in these industries are in very strategic positions within the capitalist system, and ultimately this is not going to be something that's going to be easy, and it's going to require the bosses to be brought to the table kicking and screaming, and the ones that have the leverage to do that are the workers who work in the industries in question. And that might seem like a challenging problem, especially considering this past week you might have been at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District hearing on the proposed Rule 6-5 and heard a lot of building trades union members who work in the refineries who were partnering with the Western States Petroleum Association talk about how the proposed rule would result in the loss of jobs. Now, as a union member, I am very disgusted when the employers do this. They whip the workers up into a hysteria and sow a bunch of fear based on lies and misinformation. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why that proposed rule would result in the loss of refinery jobs. If anything, it would create jobs because new equipment would have to be installed, and that's skilled work. But there's an old saying, and a common problem, and that is that facts don't change attitudes. There are perceptions that have to be overcome. And I think a lot of us have some unformed perceptions about what it's like to decommission or to do a transition in one of these fossil fuel infrastructure situations where the workers might be considering, where the workers might be at risk of losing their jobs. So one thing it's important to note is that in some ways it's easier than we think, in some ways it's more difficult than we think. The ways in which it's easier are the technical ones, and that's in some ways a good thing. For example, most of the jobs involved in the fossil fuel supply chain are not actually directly related to fossil fuels themselves. For example, the exploration or search for new deposits can be repurposed for doing things like siting renewable energy sites. Offshore oil rig workers could be retrained as offshore wind power technicians, and many of the ancillary jobs, such as transportation of workers to and from sites, dispatching workers, or for that matter, energy, clerical work, and other things related to it, they're directly transferable. And the transportation of goods and commodities can be utilized to transport alternative goods and commodities, such as grain, rather than coal. Where jobs may not be directly transferable, they can be retained for the purposes of repurposing or decommissioning the infrastructure or the restoration of damaged ecosystems. Such efforts often require years or decades, thus providing enough job years for mature workers, often those with the highest seniority, wages, and benefits anyway, to last until retirement or at least allow sufficient time for just transition. Failing that, many of these jobs can be made much greener without decommissioning, if a holistic approach as opposed to an all-or-nothing approach is utilized, and transition efforts focus on the low-hanging fruit, such as retiring older, more polluting facilities first, for example. Some processes, like oil refining, might continue, but for purposes of medical needs, for example, rather than production of combustion of fossil fuels for energy. Alternatively, while it's not 100% green, at least not at first, some of these refineries could be repurposed to produce hydrogen, and the refining process itself can be greened by replacing gas or coal-fired heating with solar, etc. on site. Now, I want to caution and preface this by saying that this is not by any means guaranteed, and currently a lot of the hydrogen being proposed is not green hydrogen, and it is a greenwash, so this is something we have to be careful of. But it's notable that it's possible. And speaking of hydrogen, much of the fossil fuel supply chain could fairly easily be repurposed for hydrogen, and production of hydrogen can be made strictly green, meaning no coal, oil, or gas, other than for lubricants. Hydrogen may be a good alternative storage medium for batteries, considering the lithium problem that we have to face. And as for the wages of the skilled workers in the fossil fuel extractive supply chains, those that aren't transferable to other skills, jobs, etc., even in the same supply chain, work site, or even employer, let's keep in mind the following. When people speak of these six-figure wages plus benefits or even higher, generally these are not average entry-level wages, these are the more senior employees. In most cases, the more senior level employees, especially those represented by unions, are least likely to face transfer, layoffs, furloughs, and or termination. They're also likely to be closer to retirement age. Job losses, if any, can be achieved by attrition of more senior employees. Entry-level wages are likely to be closer to median wages in green renewable industries. And a robust transition plan must address wage and benefit differentials as well as allow for union organizing in the new industries. And we should not fall into the capitalist trap of giving into feelings of resentment towards well-compensated skilled union employees rather than working to build strong unions and a labor movement capable of raising the standards and working conditions of all other workers, unionized or otherwise. And I will point out, riffing on what Justine said, the more people who are employed, the harder it is to stop unionization because it's not easy to threaten a worker by saying, well, if you don't like your job, I can just hire somebody else who will take it. But if everybody's working, then that gives workers a lot more leverage to organize a union. And it's entirely possible that these some well-paid employees might be open to shorter work weeks with no loss in hourly wages or benefits, though there's no real reason why they couldn't simply demand shorter work time with no loss in overall wages to reduce the amount of person hours engaged in fossil fuel extractivism or other destructive industrial practices for that matter. Those are the technical reasons why it might be easier, but in some ways it might be more difficult, and these are largely psychological and perception. The most important reason is that facts don't change attitudes. There's a lot of deeply held cultural beliefs, many of them stoked by the capitalist class when and where it suits them, or the Republican Party, which isn't either mutually inclusive or exclusive to the former, but does tend to align itself more closely with the fossil fuel extractive capitalism than the Democrats. Even though the climate movements, eco-socialists, green unionists, and the like no doubt have the potentially affected workers' best interest at heart, and in mind far more so than their capitalist employers, there's often few or no extant bonds of trust between the workers and activists, even as some of the later are union members, and establishing that trust can be painstakingly difficult. Even though an effective worker might suffer no material loss from a transition, particularly a genuinely just transition, there are intangible losses that can occur. One is that many unions have legacy programs, and often employers honor them, such as equal opportunity laws will allow, such that children of longtime employees can easily follow in their parents' footsteps. So it's not unlikely that a worker sees their job as not only essential to their own future, but to their children's and children's children's futures, and so forth and onward. Many workers see their specific job, particularly if they've held it most of their career, as part of their identity and consider its loss, even if made whole through a fair transition, as a blow to their dignity. And it's especially true if they are a legacy as described in the previous point. Additionally, there's a substantial degree of machismo involved in extractive industrial labor as well as building construction, a phenomenon sometimes described as petromasculinity. While this is not a laudable tendency by any means, the fact is that it exists, and it represents a challenge and a barrier to get past. It further complicates matters that environmentalism and clean tech are sometimes, for good as well as ill, identified with feminism, including ecofeminism. Personally, I find the latter a positive thing, but for male-dominated heavy industry labor, this is often looked down upon as a form of weakness and emasculation, a form of toxic masculinity that the capitalists, climate change denialists, and right-wing politicians, especially those like Donald Trump, exploit to the hilt. And historically, under capitalism, fair transitions have often been promised but rarely delivered, especially after the political horse trading that is typical of liberal capitalist democratic legislative politics takes its course, and workers' concerns are often the first of these things to be sacrificed. And of course, many of the green jobs that we've talked about are low-wage, non-union jobs. That said, there are millions of green jobs not traditionally hyped as such, and Justine touched on a few of them, like public transit workers, woodland firefighters, farm workers, recyclers, building efficiency workers, and many more that are unionized, or at least have better working conditions but aren't necessarily proposed as elements of a just transition. While all of the above challenges aren't insurmountable, They're made more challenging by the predominantly capitalist economy and the lack of a sufficiently organized, militant, and practically at least anti-capitalist labor movement necessary to collectivize and realize the potential power of the working class to serve as a countervailing force against capital with the ultimate aim of abolishing capitalism altogether. Now, this may seem like a big challenge, but it's gotten better in recent years. And one thing that I will note, and I will sort of wrap up with this somewhat encouraging note, and this is the importance of the Green New Deal to all of this, is that many of the union workers in these industries who are the ones most likely to be affected and tend to be the unions most resistant to getting involved in climate change, supporting climate justice and the Green New Deal, are starting to have the conversation and starting to say, they're basically starting to approach the climate justice movement and say that they believe that these things need to happen, and they're starting to name their terms for this to happen, and this includes naming dollar figures of what it's going to cost for a just transition to occur, instead of at least being resistant to it. I'm going to drop a few articles in the chat box here, but one of the most recent ones is a new analysis that the United Utility Workers of America and the Union of Concerned Scientists put out, and it talked about needing to have $33 to $83 billion investment in a just transition for workers. So that gives us some sort of a figure of what we need to fight for in a Green New Deal program, whether it's forcing Congress, I wouldn't say waiting for it, or the local funding, or somewhere in between, or a combination of all of the above. Similarly, the United Mine Workers of America came out with a figure of somewhere beyond $38 billion. And there are other things we have to worry about and other challenges we have to face. The unions that are starting to finally talk about just transition, that have been intransigent about it, are still calling for things like carbon capture and storage and biofuels, which obviously are a problem for frontline communities. So we have a long way to go. There's a lot of negotiation that needs, but I think there's a lot of common ground that we can fight for, and one of them is making sure there is funding for just transition. I'll finish up by pointing out, by the way, that the union movement is anything but a monolith, and these are only the most conservative unions that we're talking about, and the ones that are most deeply involved in the fossil fuel supply chain. There's a great deal of support for the Green New Deal among the union movement. In fact, it polls higher among the union movement than it does among the general public. I believe the union movement, it polls somewhere in the range of 67 to 75%, whereas among the general public, it's better than 60%. And there are many unions that support the Green New Deal. In fact, my union, the Inland Boatmen's Union, my ferry transport union, passed a Green New Deal resolution at its international convention last year. I'm the one who wrote it, but it got unanimous support. So I would say that we have our work cut out for us, but I think the Green New Deal does offer a framework for which we can organize together and make this transition happen. And I want to thank you again for letting me speak. It's definitely an honor. Sorry if my presentation was a little bit rambling, but hopefully that gives you some information to go on.
Okay, thank you so much. We've got one question. Gordon, you want to go ahead?
Unmuted. It's a comment rather than a question. We have a similar problem with health insurance with these bureaucrats that were saying you can't get insurance, and it's going to be a just transition problem for them when we go to single payer health care. Yield. Well, I'll close by saying we need to consider this as a new area of emphasis for society. Economic transitions are going to occur because of technology, or we figure out a better way. And we've got to figure out what to do with these people. The market economy used to supposedly take care of it, and it's not adequate for the job. At this point, I yield forever.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more question, if there is one. Would somebody like to either comment or ask a question?
Well, I'll respond to that last point about healthcare. that's very true. And, you know, the transition isn't just going to be about fossil fuels. There's a whole bunch of much deeper transitions that need to happen. I mean, for example, one of the things that's talked about in terms of green jobs, by the mainstream Democrats and the mainstream green movement is electric vehicles. And obviously there needs to be a transition for the auto workers building these vehicles, but there are much deeper considerations that need to happen, such as, we really should be talking about redesigning our cities so that there is a public transit-oriented or walking-oriented system as opposed to the one based on the private automobile. Because while electric vehicles might solve one problem, and that is decarbonization, there's also the issue of extraction of the minerals for these vehicles. There's also the issue of vehicles and car-oriented cities still create a economic and racial divide, and they also in our cities in ways that are not healthy. So there's a lot of questions that have to be raised about this, but the transition that's going to have to happen is going to create so many jobs. And I would like to point out, don't believe the hype about the job apocalypse or the robot apocalypse where every job is going to be automated. That's not going to result in less jobs. It's going to result in de-skilling and casualization of labor. So the problem exists. The problem isn't that there aren't going to be people working. The problem is it's going to be a lot more like working for Amazon in the Amazon warehouse, where you've got things tracking you all the time. You've got algorithms making sure you're working at a certain pace and getting as many tasks done in a certain time. So the issue is not going to be about job loss. The issue is going to be about what the quality of our jobs are going to be. And that is why we definitely need labor unions and why organizing is as important as ever.
Okay, I think we're going to need to move on to our next segment. Thank you so much, Steve, and I hope you come back again. Okay, the next part of our meeting, we're going to have Austin Tam from Fabulous Alameda talking about human rights issues in the Philippines.
Thank you, Carol, and our revolution. I'm not able to stay, but I wanted to introduce my colleague EJ from ICHIRP that will speak about the Philippine Human Rights Act and to ask for your support, and as well as Alameda County Central Committee that I'm on endorsed this legislation that has yet to have a number. But I want to introduce you to EJ, and EJ, thank you for speaking today. Goodbye.
Of course. Thank you, Austin, for the intro, and thank you everybody here for having me today. I recognize a few folks in the Zoom, which is cool. I'm an organizer of many different hats, but today I'm here with you all as a member of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, ICHIRP. And just a little bit about me, my father actually moved here from the Philippines at the tail end of the Ferdinand Marcos dictatorship in the early 80s. And many of the stories that I've heard and read from that time closely resemble a lot of the stories that I'm hearing and reading about today. So as Austin mentioned, I'll be speaking a bit about the human rights situation currently in the Philippines and hopefully how our Revolution East Bay can stand in solidarity with the Filipino people. So just to begin and jump right into it, the Philippines, has a really bad reputation in terms of human rights, and they've been deemed one of the deadliest countries in the world for land defenders, journalists, and trade unionists. According to human rights groups, the number of killings under the current Duterte administration, which is infamous for its deadly drug war, has risen to 30,000 over the last few years. And however, despite this, since 2016, the United States has provided $550 million in military aid to Duterte. Human Rights Watch, the big international organization, has documented that the human rights situation in the Philippines has deteriorated in the past year, even amidst the global pandemic. They've documented that the killings increased dramatically during the COVID-19 lockdown, rising by over 50% during April to July of 2020 compared to the previous 4 months. And there's been almost total impunity for these killings. In June of 2020, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights published a really highly critical article and report on the human rights situation that I can share with folks after. And then later in October of 2020, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution continuing scrutiny of the situation in the country for another 2 years. And despite all this, threats and attacks, including killings against left-wing political activists, environmental activists, community leaders, indigenous peoples leaders, journalists, lawyers, really everybody in the country have been targeted over the past year. The government harassed journalists and media companies, including through politically motivated prosecutions and other legal action. A court in the Philippines convicted journalist Maria Ressa of cyber libel in June. If you haven't heard of Maria Ressa, she was Time Magazine's Journalist of the Year. And just a month after that conviction, the government shut down the country's largest television network the following month. So we're calling, at ICHRP, and in addition to our other allies at Malaya Movement and Kabataan Alliance, we're calling for the introduction of the Philippine Human Rights Act, the PHRA for short. And specifically, the text would suspend United States security assistance with the Philippines until such a time as the human rights violations by the Philippine security forces cease and the responsible state forces are held accountable. So this bill, the PHRA, will hopefully be introduced soon. We're asking for your support in becoming an official endorser of this campaign for the suspension of US military aid to the Philippines. Rep. Susan Wild from Pennsylvania introduced it last year, and it garnered widespread support. 29 US reps also joined Wild as co-sponsors. Additionally, over 160 organizations backed the bill, including youth groups, faith organizations, labor, women's groups, LGBT organizations, many others. Some notable organizations include multiple chapters of the Democratic Socialists of America and the United Methodist Church General Board of Church and Society. So we know that an endorsement from Our Revolution East Bay would go a long way in helping to amplify the call to pass the PHRA, but also would support Filipinos living here in the Bay Area. If you've heard of Brandon Lee, he is an SF native, San Francisco native and human rights defender who actually survived an extrajudicial assassination attempt while he was living and working in the Philippines with indigenous communities. Thankfully, he's back home now in the Bay Area, but he's still using his voice to speak out against the crimes of the Duterte regime. Additionally, out here in the East Bay, on this side of the bridge, local activists have been targeted online on social media, have been harassed. So we know that the support from all our endorsers goes well beyond the borders of the Philippines. And these acts of solidarity will help not only protect human rights defenders out there, but also Filipino activists here in the diaspora. So with that, it's a really broad overview. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I want to be able to offer time for questions. And if there's any questions that I can't answer or don't have the answer to, I'll just take note and make sure that I could send it either to Austin or to you all directly to get that info as soon as possible.
Okay, would anybody like to ask a question or make a comment? Are you raising your hand, Sudia? Unmute. Sudia, we need you to unmute if you have something to say.
Or if you'd like to type it in the chat, maybe we could take a question from someone else, and then I could answer once you're able to type the chat in the,
Okay, is
or
there
type the
somebody
question
else who
chat.
would like to make a comment or ask a question?
Oh, I did it.
Okay,
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not clear about what as a non-profit organization, I'm not clear about what we are allowed to do. Like I work for a nonprofit and we're not allowed to to support any political things. And I recently started a nonprofit organization, and I wrote to the IRS my whole proposal, and it came
Yeah, we're
back.
actually not a nonprofit technically like that. We're not a 501c3, we're a C4.
Okay, so OREB is not that. But
Right.
anyway, they're just really weird. Like I was said, what do you mean by green? So they didn't understand the word green. And I talked about having democratic dialogues, and I was immediately attacked by supporting the Democratic Party. I said, no, it was part of the Constitution, democracy, a democratic dialogue. So, you know, sometimes I just get like, wait, are we doing the right thing? Or are we intimidating their narrowness? But if you say that it's not in that way a nonprofit and that we are allowed to endorse, then that's great.
Okay. How would you like our Revolution East Bay to support you?
So I can send either to Austin or to you all the official endorsement forms, so you could review and you know, make a decision, you know, however you all go about making those decisions. But essentially, an endorsement is, you know, the main ask that I'm making today. With an endorsement, you'll get all the updates about how the campaign's moving, and, you know, additional calls to action to support if you would like or have capacity to support.
Yeah, get it to Austin and he can get it to us, and then we'll take it up at a meeting and just talk about it.
Another point is that there are so many countries that the US is peddling their arms to that we would have a lot of countries to make sure that our arms didn't go to right now.
That's a great point. Yeah, and this is just free resources that we're talking about today. This does not even include all the sales that are going to the Philippine government and have been going to their, you know, to their armed forces for a long time.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And I'll be looking for it. Austin will get it to me in Messenger or something.
Perfect. I'll share, you know, links and the forms and everything, just so you all are informed.
Okay,
Thank you
and
all.
I'll
Take care.
pass it on. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to move on, folks. The next person that we have speaking is Matthew Lewis, who, in addition to being a speaker here, he is the webmaster for our Revolution East Bay, and he's going to speak about a couple of things. So go for it, Matthew. Did we lose Matthew?
I don't see him.
He's just on the phone. I'm trying to get him to unmute.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. I've lost the I lost my Zoom connection. I was on phone for audio, but I don't have a stable connection, so that's why I got
Okay,
lost.
we can hear you. We're fine. Go for it.
Okay, great. Well, I'm here to talk about about two things that are happening in Berkeley. The first is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, which our Revolution East Bay endorsed a strong version of a couple of months ago. So I'll just start by recapping what the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act is. The way this law works is that whenever a landlord decides they want to sell their building, what they'll have to do is first let the tenants in the existing tenants in the building make an offer to buy the building, and the landlord can accept or decline that offer. And then right after that, basically nonprofits in the city can do the same if the tenants did not make a successful offer. And then the second step of that is that if that didn't work out, then if the landlord finds that they have found somebody who wants to buy the building for let's say it's for $1 million or $10 million, they have to go. They then have to, before they can sell the building, they would have to give the tenants the opportunity to purchase the bill to match that offer of $10 million or a nonprofit. And that's basically how the law works. And the idea is that there would be subsidies available to tenants to buy the building and make it permanently affordable, or the nonprofit again. And so over 36 organizations, probably over 40 now, over 40 organizations have endorsed a strong, comprehensive tenant opportunity to purchase act. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago at a meeting of the city's land use committee, the mayor of Berkeley, Jesse Arreguín, announced that he was going to basically gut the law in basically four ways. The first is that he's decided to exempt 95% of all single-family homes from the law. The second thing he's doing is he's exempting all owner-occupied duplexes. The third thing he's doing is he's significantly shortening the timelines that tenants have to basically to make offers. Tenants and nonprofits have to make offers to try to find financing, et cetera, making it much harder for them to actually use the law, even though it exists on paper. And the fourth is basically delaying implementation for 2 whole years till 2023, and making it a much more consultant-driven process. So all of this is really bad. He did not tell the coalition, which has again over 40 organizations that have endorsed this, or over 40 organizations. Didn't tell them anything. People only found out about it when it had to get legally posted on the website, these gutting amendments. And so that's what's happening with TOPA, is the mayor is basically trying to gut the law. And so what we really need is that when it comes before the full city council, we really need folks to be really telling their friends and neighbors what's happening about the important benefits this law will do to give tenants the opportunity to have affordable housing and to send letters and turn out in large numbers. So that's not we're not quite certain yet when the law will be coming back. But that's what's happening with that. The second thing that's happening, and this is something that's much more time sensitive, is, sorry, could somebody let me into the meeting? I just thank you so much. So second thing that's happening with, okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. The second thing.
No.
Now we can't anymore, Matt.
Matthew, we can't hear you at all anymore.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, we didn't hear you for the past minute and a half.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So the second thing that's happening, as you may recall, starting a year ago, there were significant activism in demanding finally to do real reforms to the police, including eliminating their role in responding to mental health crises and defunding the police and reallocating their funding to services such as affordable housing, homelessness, free health care, and education. And people, including in Berkeley, made big demands for that. Unfortunately, the mayor and the city council in Berkeley responded by actually increasing the percentage of the city's general fund that went to the police department, but saying that they would, do some more defunding that November, and that they would reimagine what policing looked like, as well as shift mental health things away from police. Right now, the city is writing its next budget, and at a recent meeting of the city's budget committee, Mayor Arreguín and Councilmember Droste voted to direct the city manager to actually increase the funding that's going to the police department, and put them in charge of more mental health responses, which is the exact opposite of what the city council said that they were going to be working on doing when they said they would reimagine the police and said they would set a goal of defunding by up to 50%. So what we're seeing is that they're doing the exact opposite of what the community demanded after they said that they wouldn't do it. They said they wouldn't do it immediately, but they would do it events. But they would do it eventually, and they're going in the exact opposite direction. And that's absolutely not okay. So there's going to be a meeting of the city's budget and finance committee this Thursday. This Thursday at 10 a.m. And what we need from folks is one, to send to email letters to the city council before then, saying that this is unacceptable and we need to decrease the amount of money going to the police department, not increase, and that we need to have nonprofits, not the police, responding to the to mental health crises. So again, sending letters, and then also, if you're able to, giving public comment at the meeting, which is going to take place over Zoom. Our Revolution East Bay has made a Facebook event to promote this. And I just posted in the chat the link about this. Again, the meeting is going to be this Thursday at 10 a.m. So please send your letters before then, and then give public comment during the meeting. We really can't have them. Every dollar that goes to the police budget is a dollar that is stolen from things like affordable housing, homeless services, single payer free healthcare, and education. So that's why it's super, super important. I'm happy to answer any questions about either of these issues.
Anybody have a question?
Well, I guess I can sort of be
Okay.
the dog in the manger, but I'm getting pretty tired of this. You can't walk down the street without some thug sticking a gun in your face. You can't park your car on the street without having the windows broken. So we don't have enough police. We need more.
So I disagree with that, and I think that we've seen that, like, the community disagrees, that we need to reimagine how we're approaching policing. We need to, if somebody is stealing your car, it's most likely they're not doing it because, like, they want to steal a car. They're probably doing it because they've been out of work for at least 12 months due to a pandemic. And a better way than putting police to lock them up and stuff would be to be creating jobs program, reallocating that money so that they don't need to be out stealing a car, for instance, or mugging somebody. That would be a better solution. We need to stop the causes of crime. I would say is one of the big things. And we've also seen time and again across the country and in Berkeley specifically, the police cannot be trusted to handle these issues, to handle dealing with particularly people of color, or also people having mental health crises in an appropriate way. We've seen so many people, Tamir Rice, George Floyd, just like die in interactions with the police. And so we need what we've been doing hasn't been working.
Okay, we have a question now from Igor.
It's a comment. It's brief, just in regards to the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. I completely agree that, we need to get the city council to put back into the ordinance things that were taken out. I will mention that despite this weakening of the ordinance, very powerful moneyed interests are sending out mailers full of lies to districts that include council members, including Terry Taplin, Kate Harrison, and others who they feel will support this ordinance, whether things are put back in it or not. And this is just the second or third coming of the same dirty tactics that were used in the 2020 election, where they were trying to buy themselves seats. So totally agree. We do need to get the council to put back those things, but also wanted to just provide a little bit of framing too about the bigger picture of even with those provisions being taken out, they're very moneyed, powerful interests that are spending a lot of money on lies and disinformation to try to get the council to not pass anything at all. So very
Actually, Igor, maybe it's time we just name them. I mean, let's not be shy anymore.
sure. The National Association of Realtors, the California Association of Realtors, the Oakland Berkeley Association of Realtors, and the Berkeley Property Owners Association.
And who are they targeting?
I also want to clarify two things Igor said. One is they didn't just try to buy a council seat; they did buy a council seat in District 2. They spent a lot of money and they elected a council member there against the incumbent that our Revolution East Bay endorsed. And the other thing I want to clarify is what the mayor did is not simply weakening the law; it's gutting the law. That's not just me saying that. Gutted is a direct quote from the Yes to TOPA coalition. So we need and yes, we need to. It's the real estate. It's the real estate industry that spends so much money in Berkeley and everywhere that's trying to stop the law as well.
Okay, so you've put a link in, Matthew, so people will know where to email and how to get into the meeting?
Yes, I want to clarify again that that link is for the second thing I talked about, not the TOPA thing. We don't know yet when TOPA is coming to council. Yeah. It's for the mayor and Councilor Drossi's attempt to go against the community's demands and increase funding for the police. And that link, which I'll post again, it's in the event description. There's also a template letter that you can. I just posted it again. There's a template email that you can send to the mayor and city council, as well as instructions of where to send it to, and you can also draw from that for talking points. So please send those ASAP. We need to make clear that this is unacceptable. We cannot just be doubling down on these same failed strategies.
Okay, great. We've got to move on now. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Yes. Also want to encourage anybody who's not yet a dues-paying member of Our Revolution East Bay to please become one, and I will post the link for that in a few seconds.
Oh, okay, we're going to move on. And before we move on, I just want to remind people that on Wednesday, June 16th, we're having a big fundraiser for Nina Turner with guest speakers, Pamela Price, Javanka Beckles, Gail McLaughlin, Alex Lee from the State Assembly. Let me see who else. I don't want to leave anybody out. Jenny Wong and Kimberly Ellis. And right now I'm putting the link in again. So if you haven't signed up, please sign up. Okay, we're ready to move on now. And our next speaker is Igor Triga, who's been involved in a lot of things going on in California, and he's going to speak about several different issues. Go for it, Igor.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to see you all. And I was asked to provide a legislation update. For those of us who were following the state legislature process, this past week was extremely busy, as both the Assembly and the Senate had until this past Friday to decide on the fates of over 1,000 bills that were submitted originally. So what happens is, of the many, many bills that are submitted, there are committee votes that happen, and then of the ones that pass through a committee of origin, or sometimes multiple committees, the ones that cost over a particular threshold, which I believe is 150K or 200K, but please don't quote me on that. They have to go to the Appropriations Committee. And of those, the Appropriations Committee only appropriates a fraction of those. The ones that do not move forward get stuck in the suspense file. So when you hear something is left in suspense, they basically die. And then of those bills that move through appropriations, they're voted on the floor. And so literally up until the very last minute on Thursday, there were some really, well, there were lots of bills that the full assembly or the full Senate was voting on. And I'm here to talk about the ones that, well, the ones that some of you all might have been tracking. And in order to do this, I'm gonna, looks like if someone can
You
allow their
you want to
screen.
share screen? Oh, okay, hold on one second. All right,
Awesome.
you should be able to.
So what I'm going to put on the screen is our legislative matrix for the Alameda County Democratic Party. These are the this is the legislation that we have supported or opposed a particular position. And I'm just going to run through these. This is going to be a bit imperfect. It doesn't include all the different outcomes yet, but I'm going to try to touch on some of the priorities. So on the housing front, one that was sadly did not make it past the suspense file was AD18, which was the Affordable Disaster Housing Revolving Development and Acquisition Program. There was another bill, AB 1487, which is the Universal Right to Counsel, which thankfully did move forward and it is now going to the Senate. There are some separate funding requests that are going to be part of a budget trailer bill or are part of a budget trailer bill that are still being negotiated with the governor's office. So some of the things that died may still end up in the budget, and that's a bit of a consolation. There were some bills that the Sierra Club opposed, including increasing use of emission non-compliant off-highway vehicles, which unfortunately did pass, so we're going to have to kill this in the assembly. But one really notable bill that you probably heard a lot about from me and others was Assembly Bill 1139. It would have gutted and basically killed it the ability for folks to get access to rooftop scale solar. It was completely bankrolled by investor-owned utilities like PG&E, Sempra, also known as San Diego Gas and Electric, and others. And it was masqueraded as an equity bill, even though the only equity organizations that were behind it were AstroTurf groups that were basically created by a very well-funded, I would say well-oiled, if it wasn't a pun, machine of investor-owned utilities. We did a full court press and kind of did the possible. Lorena Gonzalez is the second most powerful assembly member because she's the chair of the Appropriations Committee. So this sailed through the committee, mostly because legislation, it's equal parts policy and politics, and everyone was scared to vote against her bill for fear that she would retaliate and make sure the bills they were carrying did not make it out of the suspense file, which in fact did happen. A lot of environmental bills got stuck just because Assemblymember Gonzalez was mad about opposition to AB 1139. On the floor, it failed 27 to 27. On a revote, the initial hearing actually had one more yes vote. And by the way, in the assembly, there are 79 active seats right now since there's a vacancy in AD18, but that does mean even despite that simple majority, 41 votes are required. So actually one person, when they ended up on the receiving side of a lot of community opposition to this bill, they actually moved from support to did not vote or abstaining. So this was a huge, huge victory for us. And one of those rare moments of celebration where, true David versus Goliath battle, and clean energy and solar, despite being smeared by powerful interests, ended up winning the day. Um, on the recycling front, there were some Pyrrhic victories. There were some bills like the thermoform minimum requirements post-consumer recycled plastic bill, which sailed through the body of origin. Unfortunately, some others like single-use packaging and carry-out bags, which Berkeley was one of the first to adopt. This was going to be a statewide bill. It it failed by 5 votes. It needed just 5 more votes to move forward. The California Desert Conservation Program, that was a good bill that became a Sierra Club priority that did pass, 59-13. And a bill that is very important to community choice aggregators like East Bay Community Energy. This can get really technical, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but that did pass and is moving forward. I'm going to talk about some other priorities. There was a really important environmental justice bill we were following around idle gas and oil well remediation, requiring former, so oil and gas vendors and contractors that had oil wells and then moved on to go and remediate those wells at personal cost. And that did pass pretty handily and is moving forward. And there was a companion bill around remediating deserted wells, which also moved forward through the Senate. There was a bill that we were following that would have made it easier to have resource adequacy requirements. This would have prioritized distributed energy resources like rooftop scale solar. That was one of the bills that got stuck in Lorena's committee because she was mad about AB 1139, and Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, who was opposed to that bill. So she was carrying the bill. It died this year, unfortunately. There's a sea level rise bill by Majority Leader Atkins. Because she's a majority leader, of course, it moved forward and is now going into the assembly. There was a bill to protect Tesla Park. This is Tesla the park, not the car, from off-highway vehicles. This is in the Tri-Valley, so an important priority to Alameda County. A very similar bill like this went all the way to the governor, but was vetoed there. So we're trying again. And it did pass its last House of Origin. On the concrete front, things were, again, we won some, we lost quite a few. There was one bill that moved forward, working towards cleaner concrete. There were several other building decarbonization bills that died. And then there were some other bills that did move forward. I believe the Dodd, this is protecting folks who had waters shut off from underneath them. I believe those 2 bills are moving forward. I wanted to mention a really key priority bill to many of us, known as the Vision Act, which was a bill that, for those of you familiar with SB 54, the Values Act, that put a lot of restrictions on those who were leaving, who were either in the California carceral system or about to leave it, prohibiting local authorities from collaborating with ICE to deport them or holding them in ICE facilities. That bill did pass and was signed under Jerry Brown, the then governor, but unfortunately it provided a lot of loopholes, and those loopholes have been exploited to get a lot of folks who really, in my opinion, should never have, been in prison in the first place, just fell on tough times, were raised without mentor figures, or had to join a gang to be able to protect their own lives or their families' lives. So there were, unfortunately, many of them, who served their time were about to be released under those loopholes. They were then still deported. The Vision Act, Assembly Bill 937, it gets rid of every single one of those loopholes. And it was a really, really close vote. And I was involved on the Bend the Arc Jewish Action side, working in community with a lot of immigration rights organizations. And ultimately, this was one of the last votes that were taken on Thursday late afternoon, and we were all at the edge of our seats. It needed 41 votes to pass. Originally, we got 40. We saw the board say it got 42 votes, so we were all celebrating. But then suddenly, two people who voted yes ended up withdrawing their votes did not vote. That would have taken it down to 40, and it needed 41 votes to pass. Thankfully, it turned out that a couple of late additions came on, even though they were not included in what we saw on the billboard that flashes in the assembly proceeding to show the number of votes. So it ended up passing just by the skin of its teeth, 42 votes in support, and is now moving on to the Senate. I know that there were a lot of other bills that you all might have been tracking. And if I didn't talk about any of your priority bills, my apologies. I'm still working to compile a scorecard. But if there are any particular bills that you all endorsed or interested in hearing how it fared, there's a really easy way to check that. And I'm just going to go ahead and show you so that we can use this as an educational opportunity. This is basically the same thing that I've just been doing. So if you go on leginfo.legislature.ca.gov, this is the place where you can find any bills. So I know another priority was the bill that would have banned fracking and provided oil setbacks that unfortunately did not move past committee. But so you can click on the bill number. It will give you a search. It's SB 467, oil and gas. And if you go to the history, you can see exactly what happened to it. Unfortunately, this one failed passage in committee, and that was a really heartbreaking moment for us. Although the governor has since announced that he's going to declare moratoriums through executive action. Happy to, again, happy to answer questions. If you have any bills I didn't discuss that you want to know about, we can do a really quick search right now and take a look at how it fared. And thank you so much for your advocacy. As the bills around 1139 and the Vision Act have shown, it may not seem that way all the time, but all those calls that you're making to your legislator really, really do make a difference. And sometimes David does prevail against Goliath, as happened twice in this particular legislative cycle.
Okay, does anybody want to make a comment or ask something of Igor? Okay. No comments? Come on, you guys. Igor, thank you so much. This
Oh.
is, we need to have this kind of thing regularly.
I think Paloma or Sujit.
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess, wow, thank you for that work. I appreciate it, but it did go by fast. And I'm wondering, I didn't hear if you said anything about Cal Care. Isn't that the, the healthcare, Medicare for All bill? Did you mention that or not?
I did not.
That one down.
And can you remind me
it's
of
AB 1400.
1,400.
14? Yeah, I've
It's a
been.
2-year, it's a 2-year bill.
Yeah, so there's sort of this pecking order of like, if a bill dies, it just dies. You have to introduce it the next session. There's a subset of bills that at the request of the author might get not completely sacrificed, but become 2-year bills. And that affords the author carrying the bill more time, more opportunity to pick up additional support. So that is a fight that we will continue to wage, and particularly it will come to a head next year.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Igor.
Sherry, did you want to add to that or?
I
you
just
already said-
wanted to kind of let people know, and I know you've all seen Igor, but Igor does a wonderful job for our Alameda Central Committee in evaluating these bills and helping get the endorsement of some of these bills and getting the power behind some of these good bills. So I just wanted to thank him for all the work he does.
Oh, thank you so much, Sherry. And I totally did not pay Sherry to say that.
No, for those of you who don't know, Igor is a long-time member of our Revolution East Bay and many, many other organizations. And and I'm not saying this in the tone of know-it-all, I'm saying when you need to know about something, he is the person to turn to. You know? Okay, I think we're going to move on now. I don't believe the next person is here. Is somebody here from Giannini's campaign yet? I don't think they're here yet. So Sherry wanted to make an announcement, and this would be a really good time for her to make her announcement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carol. The Alameda Progressives are going to hold a webinar, YouTube meeting on Tuesday, this Tuesday. I know it's real short notice, but we're going to feature the chair of the California Democratic Party's Arab American Caucus. His name is Yasser Dabur, and he's going to speak to us about the issues of Palestine. I know we've all been reading about all of the things that are going on in Gaza and the problems with Israel and Palestine. This is an educational opportunity where we can listen to somebody who has actually been there, who's a refugee, and he's going to give us some insight in that. And that's this Tuesday, 7 to 8, and it's on the Alameda Progressives website, and I'll put the link in the chat. All you have to do is register, and it's also going to be on YouTube. So I'm hoping that all of you who are vitally interested in this conflict will get a little bit more information from our speaker. We
Okay, great. While we're waiting to see if our last people show up or not, maybe something's come up. We usually have a time where anybody can make an announcement about anything is the last thing we do. Let's have that right now. So raise your hand if you want to make an announcement or ask a question or anything, and we'll do that right now. Oh, come on, you guys. I know you've all got a lot of things you want to announce.
Oh, do we want to, Joaquin, did you want to talk about the KPFA whole thing?
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, okay.
Where's Joaquin?
Joaquin?
He's muted.
Okay, you got to unmute.
And let's see your picture too.
Let's get him unmuted.
Did he say he wanted to speak?
Well, I had forgotten to put him down. I remember we talked about it a couple days ago at our board meeting.
Yeah, is he there?
He's here, but
No,
Can
I
you
mean, is he
hear
actually at
us?
his computer?
Joaquin?
Unmute. Okay, I keep trying.
Okay, we got you. We hear you now.
Can we see you?
Okay.
Can we see you too?
I said I was not a robot about 6 times, but
We didn't hear that.
well, no, I had to click on a deal.
Ah, okay.
So I don't know, I'm on my phone, so I don't know all the control panel. Anyway, yes, voting for KPFA Pacifica, what do you call them?
New.
Bylaws are coming up on Monday, tomorrow. And that's going to be an important vote to either change bylaws to streamline things or not change them to keep the democratic character of the station. So anyway, there are 2 factions and hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
2 factions. One I would say is sort of like ultra democracy, and a lot of the people are Green Party members, and some are not, of course, but it's sort of like keep things the way they are. The other faction is called New Day Pacifica, and they, I think, would be characterized more like people from Wellstone Club and Democratic Club, but they think that there's a big problems in Pacifica, and there's a lot of debt and a lot of danger in not, being able to survive. So they want to streamline things, and I think they think the Pacifica board is dysfunctional. And anyway, one way to go is to go to newdaypacifica.org, and the other faction is rescuepacifica.org. So you should make up your own mind, but it's I think it's a very important what do you call it, media outlet that we have. It's very, very small and maybe in danger of failing. So maybe not, but we need to vote on it and try to maintain what we have. And anybody else have any questions offhand? But it's tomorrow is the vote, so you need to go to one of those 2 websites, New Day Pacifica or rescuepacifica.org. And you can also vote by going to elections.pacifica.org. Elections.pacifica.org. And, most of you probably know there's 5 state radio stations: Washington, DC, New York, Houston, Los Angeles, and Berkeley. So, it's a drop in the bucket compared to mainstream media and Fox News, but maybe we can grow it instead of losing it. So, okay.
Yeah, it looks like there's some questions actually for you, Joaquin.
Our other guests are here. So,
well, I mean, we should probably get the questions out of the way first.
yeah, let's do it real quick, guys.
Okay.
Sudia, Bill, and then Tom Luce, and then that's it. Go for it, Sudia.
Greg.
Actually, it's me. I have been looking at this. I do have opinion on it. And my opinion is that it's time for a change. Pacifica is just on the brink of bankruptcy. There's a huge loan that was luckily renegotiated recently, but it's coming due several $1 million. And I'm just sick and fed up with the ultra radicals who don't know how to run a business. And I hate to say it, but that's WBAI. They exist with a huge, strong signal in probably one of the largest radio markets on the planet, and have in the past, I don't know how many years, ever since I've been asking people, and I know people inside KPFA, ever since I've been asking and talking to people, WBAI has never worked in the black. In other words, they are sucking off of KPFA, and it's unfortunate, but I would rather see them set adrift. But I don't think that's not the plan of this new group. The plan is to streamline a little bit the national board so that they can make decisions more easily and have some real democratic ways of providing the national board, of voting for the national board. So I am very much in favor of a new plan, new people, a new look, and hopefully save the station, because we can't just keep doing the same thing that's been done for the last 25 years and have KPFA being the major source of funding for all these other stations. Thank you.
Okay, who was next? Bill, and then Tom, and then we've got to move on. Bill Barish.
Yeah, just quickly. First of all, I second Craig's position. And secondly, as far as voting is concerned, that vote begins tomorrow and it runs up until the 7th of July. But please vote if you're a member of KPFA, and even if you're not, become a member so you can vote. That's really important. That's all I got to tell you. Thank you.
Okay, Tom Luce.
I guess I'm the same list of these other folks. I've been getting mail about voting yes to save Pacifica, which is a network of all the other ones, not just one station. And all the people that I admire and have listened to in KPFA are saying we should vote yes for this starting tomorrow.
For the new day?
For new day.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Joaquin, and everybody that commented. We're going to move on to the last part of our program today. We have somebody from Janani Ramachandran's fabulous Our Revolution endorsed Assembly District 18 campaign. We have Otto Pippinger, if you'd like to take it. We're ready to hear from you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name's Otto Pippinger. I'm Janani's field director. Apologies that she couldn't be here. Yeah, we are into the last month of this race, and it's actually looking, very good. We have the largest sign presence. We appear to be having the largest field presence, certainly within Oakland. And some informal polling puts us tied for number 2. Now, that means that if in these last couple of weeks, we can hit hard with canvassing to expand our electorate just beyond, the hardcore of leftists who vote in every election and only really need to be informed about her. If we can strike with activism, direct door-to-door and phone contact to expand that a little bit, we have a pretty good margin. And I think a pretty good chance of success. I'm incredibly excited about this. I only took the job about a month ago, but the more time I spend with her, the more time I spend on this campaign, I am thrilled with the candidate, with the volunteer base that we have. This is one of the most exciting things I've ever been a part of in 5 years of full-time campaign work. And we're thrilled to have your endorsement, and we would really like to have your help for these next 2 weeks. I posted in the chat, apologies for spamming, but our primary needs are for phone banking or canvassing. That is what the best thing for an experienced activist to do. We do phone banking Tuesday through Thursday and canvassing Thursday through Sunday, but we can also set anybody up with an individualized packet and training. We'll also have a little bit of need for lit drops coming up and delivery driving, and lastly for text banking starting this Monday. So I don't know if any of those are things that appeal to you individually, but if we could get you at the very least to sign up on our website, that's just the simple link that I post, jananiforca.com, we can then contact you by text or email as you prefer and let you know what we have coming up. But lastly, I don't know if it's within the power of this body to do so, but I'd love to pick at least one day between now and the election that we might be able to co-host an event specifically with Our Revolution East Bay, have you bring out your members, have us deliver a script that is sort of tailor-made to meet the priorities that are shared between Jenny and you guys, put it up on social media. So let me know if that might be possible. Otherwise, I would just love it if we could get, even as little as 15 to 20 shifts over the next 3 weeks could be a colossal difference in the outcome of this election. It's going to be a close one.
I have a question. You
Please.
said she's number 2. Who do they have right now as number 1?
So for those of you who aren't familiar, this is sort of a primary. We're going to have a runoff, and then the top 2 will go on in November, right? So Bonta was the guy who held the seat previously. He was appointed out, and he is trying to get his wife to take the seat, right? He's trying to pass it to her, kind of hoping people don't notice that it's a different person because they have the same name. And so the fight is for the second place and who will challenge him in November. An important fact to understand is that Bonta has only ran against one Democrat in the last 8 years. And the last time he ran against a Democrat rather than Republican, he only won by about 50.5%. And that was for him rather than his wife. So it is a vulnerable seat if we can get this chance to run for the real thing. Yeah, Jake?
Yeah, we are actually thinking about doing a phone banking event also with state. Would it be better for us to just go into your Mobilize and just have everyone coordinating there instead of doing separate events?
That would be ideal. Yeah, you could
Okay.
also maybe send
That'd
out
be easier.
links to
That would
ours.
be easy. Yeah, that would be easier because then we wouldn't have to set up the phone bank. It's already set up. We can just
Yes.
point
So we're
everyone there.
co-hosting with Harvey Milk Club this week. We're doing like an LGBTQ list. If possible, it would be great to have you guys be our official co-hosts for the week after this coming one.
Yeah, well, here's
Yeah.
the thing. We're wrapped up right now in a Nina Turner fundraiser. And after the 16th, I think we'll have more time.
That would be fine. Yeah, let's shoot for the week
But
of.
maybe that weekend after the 16th, we could do something as a group or join something you guys have going.
Fantastic. Yeah. So every weekend we have a large canvas event. It's at 11 o'clock typically, both Saturday and Sunday. It's our most important event, really, the best way to reach voters. If we could have you guys join us for that or a phone bank, either would be terrific.
Okay,
Yeah, Jake.
if you could send me the info on that or ask, what's her name? Emma, is that the woman's name?
Yes, Emma's my colleague. Can you
Yeah, ask her to send it to Carol at Our Revolution and we'll get the information out to people.
Okay, great. Could you possibly just put your, just type it and PM that to me so I can copy and paste it?
Okay, hang
My
on.
apologies.
No problem.
You said they were tied for second. So is there someone at first and then there's 2 people tied for second? So who are the top 3 then? Is that how it
Essentially,
is?
the incumbent is going to, take number 1, almost certainly. That's Bonta.
So Bonta, right? That's his wife. Is what we're
Yes,
talking about.
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. I just got it. And
Okay.
yes, so we are basically in running our strongest competitor, and it's going to be probably one of the 2 of them, is a woman named Malia Vela. She is
From Alameda.
Yeah, city councilwoman from Alameda with also some significant ethical issues. She just got found guilty by a grand jury for violating the city charter, for trying to pressure them to make hires from her union. Yeah, we feel that Jenny represents a much stronger contrast to Bonta as, a tenant rights lawyer, as a anti-corruption member of the Oakland Ethics Commission.
She's also a Bernie Sanders supporter.
Exactly.
Which Bonta is not.
Yes, yes. So all of these things we think make us a much stronger counterpoint, a stronger alternative to Bonta. And we feel pretty confident if we do stick the landing these next couple of weeks. The only other candidate of note is James Aguilar. He's a moderate with slight more progressive leanings, but he is pretty far behind. And then there's essentially 4, write-in candidates, people who, as I understand, I think have just signed up and not done any campaigning.
Yeah, one of them has been bugging us to try to put on our Facebook page and this and that. And we have come out and we are totally supporting Janini.
Very glad to hear that. And yes,
There's also Victor.
But we're not letting people advertise in our space.
Did I say November earlier? I'm sorry. I've been working on campaigns too long. Yes, end of August. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, are there any other questions? I don't want to keep you all on the Zoom for super long.
We love being on Zoom. Come on.
All right. Well, if there's any questions, if you want me to do perform, let me know.
Would anybody like to ask about anything related to this? No? Well, okay. I guess that's it then. We really appreciate you giving us an update.
vice versa to you guys. Yeah, feel free, you have our emails. If you want, if there's any more specific questions that come up, I'm always happy to explain anything and everything about our field plan. I'm totally transparent. So reach out to me if there's something in more detail you'd like to hear about. And then, so this would be the 17th would probably be the best day. Okay, spectacular.
Yeah.
All right, that is all I need.
17th or 19th or something.
Okay, sounds good. 17th through
We'll see
19th.
what we can get together.
First availability. Wonderful. Okay. You've got the links. They are in the chat. So be sure to grab those from me before you guys log off. But again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This endorsement means a lot to us. I'm excited to be working with you. And I'm very excited to see you guys in person, hopefully in a couple of
We
weeks.
so much want her to be in the state assembly.
I think it's entirely possible. I don't take, as a progressive campaigner, I never take anything for granted, but I feel as positive about this as anything I've ever worked on. And so if we just drive it, I feel pretty good.
I think there's a lot of excitement around her campaign. And
Yeah,
that
word of mouth
means
is
a lot.
great.
Now we just
Yeah.
need the votes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Lot of-
well, thank you very much.
Of course.
So that kind of ends our formal part of our meeting. Would anybody like to make any announcements about anything? Okay, what we have coming up, we have the Nina Turner event coming up the 16th of June. Everybody, please come to that. Let's support Nina in joining the squad in Congress. Then we're not going to meet on July 4th weekend. That's when we're supposed to meet, but nobody's going to be around. People do things with their families and friends that weekend. The 24th of July, we're going to have an environmental justice town hall organized by Jake Varghese, and we're going to have incredible speakers at that. I don't know if you've been to any of other town halls. They're really great. You learn a lot. It's great people. Anyway, anybody else want to say anything? Otherwise,
Carol, I just want to remind folks again that that this Thursday we really need folks to start sending letters now and also give public comment on Thursday morning to say no budget increase for the Berkeley Police. Don't let Mayor Arrogate and Councilmember Drosty increase the police budget, which steals money from things like affordable housing. So I just posted the link again. And as a reminder, this is endorsed by Our Revolution East Bay.
okay, great. Yeah, if anybody can do that, that would be really great. So we've ended our formal meeting. We can stay on a couple minutes if people want to chat or ask
Carol,
questions of each other. Igor has something he wants to say.
yeah, really quickly. So I'd like to invite you all to a really exciting event. It will be on Zoom on Thursday, June 24th, 5 to 6:30 p.m. It's called Putting the Justice in the Just Transition. It's co-sponsored by the Sierra Club and Young Professionals in Energy SFB chapter. And it's going to include a lot of EJ Shiros and heroes in our midst, including Andrea Soto and Jessica Tovar from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance and Miss Margaret Gordon from the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. It will be moderated by Pinot Council member Devin Murphy, who I believe OREB endorsed last year, and would love to see y'all. And the link is in the chat. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Igor. We have some people here who have never been here before, or they come here and they're kind of in the shadows. If anybody would like to just raise their hand and just introduce themselves for 10 seconds, say, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I do, just so we can include everybody. If there's anybody that would like to do that, go ahead. Boy, look at all those hands. Okay, I guess that's the formal end of the meeting. And
I think Richard has his hand up.
If you want to end the.
I think Richard has his hand up.
Who?
Carol. Richard has his hand up.
It's okay. I don't have to say anything if we're running out of time.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, no, I just, I'll be the first one, and I guess the only one to say something, but my name's Richard. This is the first time I've been to an Our Revolution East Bay meeting. Nice to see everybody. Learned a lot today. I have a background in political campaigning. That's kind of my forte. So I was really happy to see somebody from Jean Anis' campaign today in here. And yeah, looking forward to future meetings, and it was great to meet everyone.
Richard, thank you for coming. We appreciate, and thanks for introducing yourself. Okay, anybody else?
Wait, hold on. Let me stop the streaming.